Hi everybody, I'm Amanda. I'm going to be talking about data service standards. And first I just wanted to acknowledge that this is work I've been doing for 2 years, but with all of these amazing women, Jenny, Heidi, Mathilde, Angie, Ignacia and Anna Pao. And this work has been with cities across North, Central and South America, predominantly cities who are managing things like open data portals, just to give you a bit of context. So a data service standard, we define this as explaining what good looks like when you're designing, developing and implementing a high quality data and analytics service. And as you might imagine, we've borrowed heavily from the original digital service standards and the UK service standards in thinking about how to put this approach to data. And this is what it looks like. So this is the sample data service standard that we came up with 3 years ago now. It's available completely openly in English, in Spanish and in Portuguese. And what you can see here are the kind of different principles or points of the standard. So for example, publishing with purpose, solving a whole problem for users, inspiring data users. And then within each point of the standard, you've got why it's important and what it means. So essentially, it's more like a policy rather than a technical standard. So if we say a standard is an agreed and documented way of doing something, and a data standard is a bit more specific, like the open contracting standard, then these are holistic. They're ways of working. They're defining what good looks like, but trying to stop what bad looks like in a context. And we think of them as a very cheap and powerful lever that can change and align behaviour. But even more importantly, it's about trying to really symbolise your intent to raise the bar, to systematise very good practice, and then to scale knowledge and communities, and to try to make these as open as possible. But a really good data service standard can't just be the points themselves. It also needs guidance that will support how teams do it, so they can look at that guidance and implement it themselves. Governance that will incentivise its use and adoption, and we've seen different models of governance in different cities, which I can talk about. And you also need a team who are going to design the standard, but also run it on the day-to-day. And these are just some of the standards that have been published over the last couple of years from Arlington, Scottsdale, Maipu and Guadalajara. And what we've really learned over the last couple of years is that to really make a good standard, you want to make sure it's unique. So it needs to be really tailored to the local context, whether that's your city or the sector you're working in. You want it to be measurable, you want it to be simple, practical, but also aspirational. And most importantly, you want it to be flexible, because as we know, our standards are changing all the time, our approach to technology is changing, our approach to data and ethics and what we deem ethical changes over time, so you want to allow for that flexibility. But generally speaking, if you're creating a standard, these are the kind of 6 things you want to have in your mind. So I'm just going to pull out some examples from some of my favourite standards and some of their points, which I love. So this is from Arlington in Texas, and they were the first city to publish a data service standard openly. And you'll see in the very first point of their standard, it's all about having a multidisciplinary team who really have that overview for looking after services. So they have a data governance group, and that's embedded right from the start. So they will review any potential new data services that are being built in the city. And that group is made up of 34 different people from different departments, different professions. And whenever any city member is making analytics now in the city of Arlington, then it must be reviewed by both technical experts and non-technical experts. So having people from legal teams, policy and procurement involved in the design and delivery of data services. And this one was particularly interesting for us because the folks who made the standard in the city were from the data team, but also the comms team. They worked hand in hand right from the beginning and really articulate they had a shared goal, which was to make information available for everybody. And from most of the cities we've worked with, they've often articulated that comms is someone they speak to at the end. They're scared things won't go through, but by bringing them from the beginning, they were able to create the standard together. Another favourite example of mine is Irvine in Texas. So one of their points of their standard is about understanding users and their needs. This is when I get really geeky, but you can see in the guidance for developers, they've got a section that's all about determining how data should be made available based on your end user needs. So when they're developing data services now, they're really thinking about the granularity of data, the frequency of updates, and the type of service that's being provided. And the thing that makes me really geeky and really excited is this part that says, will the data service alone meet the end user needs goals? So when they're building things, they're really thinking about, is a CSV enough? Is an API enough? Or actually, do we need to build an analytics service on top, like a map or visualization for other people to understand? So they're really threading through that user need and that user testing before they even build data services. So a couple more. This is from Rochester in New York, and one of the points in their standard is be strategic when choosing technology. You might think, oh my gosh, that's really vague. Do not worry, there's lots of lovely detail. So they've included things like understanding the total cost of ownership before you even build a data service, evaluating the impact of your dependencies, particularly because lots of cities have portals that are run by external companies. They want to make sure they're building things as future-proofed as they can. And then to continually assess your technology choices, so adapting those based on service requirements and industry standards. And it's probably no surprise that they had a really good, heavy tech influence in developing their standard from their tech teams. Chattanooga in Tennessee, in one of the points of their data service standard, they included points around performance evaluation. So when they're building data services now, they always have to identify metrics up front and commit to doing user research, and then really thinking about creating a culture of evaluation. And that's then supported by all this guidance to help the teams understand what that means in practice. And then just a final one from one of the other cities. This is Maipu in Chile. Again, really exciting because this is the second data service standard that was published first in Spanish in a LATAM region. And so what you're seeing here is a point around forming multidisciplinary and transversal teams. What that means in practice is that in the city of Maipu, they don't really have a lot of developers in-house. They don't have user researchers or service designers. A lot of the time they're partnering with contractors or building those skills in. And so their standard really sets the expectation that data services will be built in partnership, that they'll have the funding for those people and they'll work together as one team. So just 3 final observations about data service standards. Creating them and improving them should be a team sport. These work really well when you're doing them as a data community of practice and you're bringing together different teams and different professions right from the start. Assessments-wise, what's worked for the original digital service standard probably won't work for data services yet, and I can talk more about that. And then the final point really is to always review things, to review and refine your data service standard based on what you're learning from every data service. So when we work with cities, we recommend that as soon as they've got their standard, they then think really closely about the next 3 data services they're building. So testing this with a brand new kind of greenfield service, something completely old, and refining it, but then also working with different departments who have different levels of funding and skills to see if this works across their region. So if you're thinking about doing a data service standard, then the kind of 2 questions I always ask people to think about is, what is one bad data behavior that you'd like to reduce or stop? And what is one good data behavior you'd like to continue or encourage? And that's me at time. Thank you so much.